The Wick Ledger Company, Episode 1. The Man Who Owed Nothing. The old man's kitchen smelled like boiled cabbage and fear. Mara Vess stood in the doorway and let her eyes adjust to the lamplight, cataloguing the room the way she'd been trained to, before she'd been trained to hunt people instead of help them. One table, 2 chairs, though only one looked, sat in for years. A window boarded over from the inside, not the outside. That was the detail that mattered. People boarded windows from the outside to keep others out. This man had been keeping himself in. Henrik Voss, she said. Not a question. The man at the table didn't look up from his hands. He was maybe 60, though the deep bronze tracery climbing his left forearm, thick as rope in some places, delicate as thread in others, told a different story. A ledger. Mark that heavy on a man who looked 60 meant he'd been born a great deal younger than that. "You're the collectors," he said. His voice had the flat, used-up sound of a man who'd already had this conversation with himself 100 times and lost every round. Wick Ledger Company. Mara stepped inside. Behind her, she heard Bram duck his head to clear the low doorframe, a small mountain range trying to fit through a hole meant for regular men, and Sarah slip in silent as smoke to take the far corner, already counting exits the way she counted everything. Osric didn't come in at all. He stayed on the step outside, arms crossed, watching the street. He always watched the street first and the room second. Mara used to think it was caution. Lately she suspected it was cowardice wearing caution's coat, but she hadn't said that to his face, not yet. "I know why you're here," Henrik said. "Then you know I don't want to be." Mara pulled out the second chair and sat across from him, setting the ledger folio on the table between them. The paperwork, always the paperwork, the polite fiction that this was a business transaction and not what it actually was. 61 years borrowed against your name, Henrik. Compounding for 11 of those. The notes called. I'm not here to negotiate a payment plan. I'm here to collect what's owed, one way or another. I don't have 61 years left to give you." He finally looked up, and his eyes were a young man's eyes in an old man's face, wet and furious. "Look at me. Look at what I've already paid. There's nothing left to drain." Bram shifted his weight by the door, a small sound, boots on old wood, and Mara didn't need to look at him to know his jaw had tightened. He didn't like this part. He never liked this part, no matter how many times they did it. "Then we'll call the note," Mara said quietly, "and it dies with you all at once instead of in pieces. That's the mercy version, Henrik. I need you to understand I'm offering you the mercy version. I never borrowed 61 years. The Concord ledger says, I don't care what the ledger says." His hand slammed the table and the lamp guttered. "I borrowed 4 years. 4. To pay a physician when my daughter had the wasting fever. I paid it back. I paid it back twice over before the interest ever should have started compounding. And then one morning I woke up and the debt had tripled, and nobody at the Concord window would tell me why. And now you're standing in my kitchen telling me I owe 61 years I never spent and never saw and never—" He stopped, pressed the heel of his hand against his mouth like he could push the words back in. Mara didn't move. This was the part of the job nobody trained you for. Not the draining, not the chains, not the screaming. The part where a man told you the truth and you had to decide, in the space of a breath, whether to believe him. She'd stopped believing them a long time ago. It was safer that way. Mara turned. Osric had stepped just inside the frame, close enough to be heard, careful to stay no closer than that, his own ledger. Mark, or rather, the puckered, burned smooth absence of one, a scar shaped like a tattoo that wasn't there anymore, caught the lamplight along his wrist when he shifted. "You'd know," Mara said, not warmly. "I would. Because you used to be one of them." "Because I used to be one of them," Osric agreed, like it cost him nothing to say, though she'd learned by now that with Osric everything cost something. You just didn't always see the bill. Henrik was staring between them now, and something in his exhausted, terrified face had shifted into a horrible, fragile hope. "You can find it, the stub." "I didn't say that," Mara said, before Osric could promise anything they couldn't deliver. "I said it exists. That's not the same as us finding it before the note comes due." "When does it come due?" Mara looked at the folio, at the red Concord seal stamped across the bottom, and the collection date circled in the particular shade of rust-brown ink the clerks used because someone, decades ago, had decided that regular ink wasn't menacing enough. "Tonight," she said, "at the turn of the hour." The silence after that lasted exactly as long as it took Bram to cross the room. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He just planted himself between Mara's chair and Henrik's, arms loose at his sides in a way that somehow made his size less threatening instead of more, and said, in a voice built for calming spooked horses, "Nobody's dying in this kitchen tonight." "Bram," Mara warned, "I'm not saying we don't collect." He didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on Henrik steady, the way he always did when he was about to spend something he shouldn't. "I'm saying give me the 4 years, the ones he actually owes. I'll cover the rest myself until we sort out the paperwork." "Absolutely not." Mara was on her feet before she'd decided to stand. "Bram, that's 57 years. You do not have 57 years to just hand out like... So I'll give what I can, and we'll figure out the rest." His voice stayed gentle. His jaw did not. "I'm not watching a man die tonight for a debt that isn't his. We don't know it isn't his. You believe him." Bram finally looked at her, and there was something almost gentle in the accusation, which somehow made it worse. "I watched your face when he said it. You believe him same as I do." From the corner, Sarah's voice cut in, quieter than either of theirs, but somehow the one that landed. "There's a third option." Everyone looked at her. She'd been so still in the shadow of the boarded window that Mara had half forgotten she was there, which was, Mara reflected, exactly how Sarah liked it. 16 years old, and she'd already perfected the particular invisibility of a girl the entire legal system had agreed did not exist. "Go on," Mara said. "The Concord clerks change shift at the turn of the hour too." Sarah stepped out of the shadow and lamplight caught the smooth, unmarked skin of her forearm. No tattoo, no tracery, nothing. A blank page in a city where every single other person was a ledger written in their own skin. Whoever's holding the debt record tonight has to physically walk it from the district office to the vault steps for a counter-signature before it activates as a call. That's maybe 11 minutes of window between when a clerk leaves the office and when the note actually goes live. Mara stared at her. "How do you know that?" "Because I've been planning to rob that office for 2 months, Sarah said, entirely without shame. "And I was going to tell you eventually." Bram let out a bark of surprised laughter despite himself. Even Osric's mouth twitched. "We are not," Mara said, "robbing a Concord district office." "We're not robbing it," Sarah said. We're intercepting a piece of paperwork that was never valid to begin with before it gets validated. That's not theft. That's," she considered, "filing a complaint aggressively." Henrik made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob and pressed both hands over his face. Mara looked at the folio, at the rust-brown seal, at the clock on Henrik's wall, its pendulum swinging with a patience that felt suddenly like an insult. 40 minutes to the turn of the hour. She thought about her brother, 12 years old and 3 years from his own coming of age. 3 years from the morning the Concord would wake him up and hand him a debt he never signed for and never chose. The same debt she'd spent 6 years trying to out-clever, out-plan, out-maneuver from the inside, the way she was about to try to outmaneuver this one. She thought, this is exactly the kind of plan that gets someone killed. She thought, I am doing it anyway. "Osric," she said, "you still remember the district office floor plan?" Something crossed his face. Quick, guarded, gone before she could name it. "I remember the floor plan for every Concord building in the middle wards." "Of course you do." She didn't have time to unpack that right now, though she filed it away, the way she filed away every small, unsettling thing Osric let slip and then swallowed back down. "Bram, you're with Henrik. If this goes wrong, if we don't make it back in time, I'll cover what I can cover," Bram said, before she could finish the sentence she didn't want to finish. "You know I will." "That's not a plan. That's a sacrifice." "Sometimes," Bram said, with the maddening, gentle certainty of a man who'd built his whole life around being useful to the point of disappearing. "Those are the same thing." Mara wanted to argue. There wasn't time to argue. There was never time to argue. That was the whole cruelty of the job. Every decision made at a dead sprint, every good plan calcified into whatever bad plan was fastest. "Sarah, you're navigating. Osric, you're getting us in. I'm getting us out with that stub in hand." She grabbed the folio off the table, stuffed it under her arm and was already moving for the door. "Everybody keep your years to yourselves tonight. Nobody spends anything they don't have to. That's an order." "Wouldn't dream of it," Sarah said, in the exact tone of someone who absolutely intended to dream of it the moment things went sideways. The middle Concord wards at night were a different animal than the Hollow. Cleaner streets, gas lamps that actually worked, spaced close enough that shadows never got the chance to pool. Mara had grown up walking these streets in a Concord trainee's coat, and some old, humiliating part of her still expected them to feel like coming home instead of feeling like enemy territory. The district office sat on the corner of Ledger and Vale, 3 stories of grey stone with the Concord seal, a closed fist wrapped in chain links, each link a tiny hourglass, carved above the door big enough to be seen from a block away. A warning dressed up as an emblem. "Side entrance," Osric murmured, already moving, already sure. "Clerk's door. There's a night processor on the 2nd floor who logs incoming notes before they go to counter-signature. If we're fast, we intercept before it ever leaves her desk." "You sound very confident for a man who left the Concord however many years ago." "Some things don't change." His voice had gone flat in the particular way it did whenever she pushed too close to the parts of him he didn't hand out for free. Buildings full of people terrified of losing their jobs process paperwork exactly the same way, decade after decade. Fears reliable like that. They slipped through the side door, unlocked, because clerks working the night shift valued convenience over security in a way that would have gotten them fired if anyone senior ever noticed, and up a narrow stair that smelled of ink and tallow. Sarah went first, silent as always, counting under her breath. "Second floor, third door," she said. "Third door." The processor's office was small and cluttered, and at 11 minutes to the turn of the hour occupied. The clerk, a thin young woman with ink-stained fingers and the hollow-eyed look of Osric, had drifted to the window, watching the street below with the same careful stillness he'd had on Henrik's step, and Mara understood, watching him, that some part of him would always be half inside this building, no matter how many years he spent trying to burn the memory off along with his mark. Found it. The clerk pulled a slip free and her face changed as she read it. Confusion first, then something colder. "This says 4 years. Repaid. There's a repayment stamp right here." She looked up. "This debt was closed." "Then why did it come across my desk as 61 owed?" Mara said quietly. The clerk's mouth opened, closed. Origination records don't get amended after repayment. There's no mechanism for that unless someone reopened it. 4 minutes. "That would require an actuary's counter-signature," the clerk whispered, and now she looked genuinely frightened, in the specific way of someone who just realised the ground under her very safe, very ordinary job had a trapdoor in it. "Nobody below actuary rank can reopen a closed note. It's not possible without what?" The clerk looked at the stub, looked at Mara, looked, for just a fraction of a second too long, at Osric standing by the window with his sleeve pulled just slightly too low over his burned smooth wrist. "I don't want to know," the clerk said very quietly, and pressed the repayment stub into Mara's hand like it was something that might catch fire. "Take it. Go. I never saw you." They made it back to Henrik's kitchen with 90 seconds to spare, which Mara would later describe when telling this story as plenty of time, and which Sarah would describe as the single worst 90 seconds of my entire life, and which was, in truth, both. Bram had Henrik's hand in both of his when they burst through the door, and the look on his face when he saw the stub in Mara's fist was pure, undisguised relief. The kind he never let himself feel about his own life, only ever about someone else's. The Concord seal on the debt folio dissolved the moment Mara laid the repayment stub against it, the rust-brown ink simply lifting off the page like steam, the compounded 61-year debt unmaking itself back down to nothing because it had, provably, already been paid. Henrik made a sound Mara had heard exactly twice before in this job, both times from people who genuinely believed they were about to die and then, abruptly, weren't. "It's done," she told him. "You're clear. There's no debt." Henrik Voss put his face in his hands and wept, and nobody in the room said anything for a long moment, because there was nothing to say that wouldn't have cheapened it. It was Osric who finally spoke, still standing near the door, still half in shadow, in a voice pitched too low for Henrik to catch. "Someone reopened a closed note," he said to Mara. "That's not a clerical error. That's not a mistake anybody makes by accident. Somebody with actuary authority took a paid debt and manufactured 61 years out of nothing." His eyes found hers, and for once, just once, there was no careful rationing in them, no held-back price. "I need you to understand what that means. If they can do it to him, they can do it to anyone. They can do it to you." Mara thought of her brother, of the family debt she'd spent 6 years trying to out-clever, of every plan she'd ever made assuming the numbers, at least, could be trusted. "How many other debts do you think are like this one?" she asked. Osric didn't answer right away, and when he finally did, his voice had the particular careful flatness of a man handing over exactly as much truth as he'd decided she'd earned, and not one word more. "More than you want to know," he said, "and I think it's already started with your family too." Outside, somewhere as little wards behind them, the turn of the hour came and went, and in the vault at the centre of the city, in a ledger none of them had ever seen, a single line of ink rearranged itself, unnoticed, into a name. Mara Vess's name.